Honestly, this could have easily been a topic on itself. Characters, not just protagonists and antagonists, side characters, world building, even magic system, which is something that I would love to delve deeper and create something substantial and truly develop. Obviously, that's one of the most difficult things when creating a fantasy setting, at least from my experience of being a reader of many different types of media. The supernatural is always hard to portray to be comprehensible, yet alien enough to, well, be magical. Then there are languages. I would love to be able to even go as far as the god himself, Tolkien, who created an actual language for his story. Obviously, that's just a dream, and I'm fully aware that it's not going to happen. But at least some words, some phrases that have no meaning when the setting is a different world, I would like to be able to replace them and set them properly into the story. So I'm definitely going to use these intros to talk more about these different aspects of storytelling, even though, as I've mentioned, this could have been a topic on itself. Then I would have nothing to talk during these intros. And since I've unearthed this gold mine of intros, I'm definitely not going to just give it up. So I would like to continue for a bit with the antagonist talk, and definitely should start again prefacing that what I did during the previous video when I said that I'm fully aware that the authors and their stories are superior to anything I can personally imagine, and whatever gripes and mistakes I have with them are just pretty much my own delusions. They created stories that they wanted to, and me projecting my own wants and values onto them is, let's say, meaningless. I mostly just want to use them as examples to show properly on a story that is well known the points that I'm trying to make desperately to sound at least semi comprehensible with my mediocre English and the ability to form proper sentences and vocalize the thoughts I have in a at least meaningful, comprehensible way, even though they might not be correct in terms of the usually perceived way characters are built and stories are built, but it's my idea how I would like to approach it. And to finish this preface, I did say that I am fully aware that these authors are able to actually create a story and that it was their story they wanted to make. But then I failed to get to said authors and their stories, so I need to say it again. I mentioned a few things about female villains being my main point, that I am aware of exceptions, and then I wanted to say a few things about female characters in different world stories, mostly focusing on fantasy, and what I would like to achieve in my own writing, my own stories, my own storytelling with said characters. And wanted to point out one example, something that I perceive as the absolute pinnacle of writing and storytelling in general, which would be Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I am solely now talking about the trilogy, and mostly going off the movies, since the books definitely did expand on some of these points that I'm going to mention, but if it's just the trilogy, most of them stand, and I am again aware that there are some very prominent female characters in that story, but even then they are hampered by our standards, our rules that seemingly tie our perception that women are weaker than men and not suitable for war, as we see with Eowyn. And she is a huge exception. She's extremely important to the story. She is a fighter. She is the slayer of the Witch King of Angmar, but still she is the only woman who rides with the Rohirrim towards Minas Tirith, and even during the Helm's Deep defense, extremely young men are fitted with armor that doesn't suit them, and yet women are sent to safety. Again, as in our world, women there are perceived as not suitable for war, even if it's a war that's going to decide the fate of the entire Middle Earth. They are still protected, and that is something that I don't want in my story. I want it to be situated in a different world, a different universe, a different setting, and that setting to not be tied down to whatever our history or even our current climate and situation is. It is definitely Tolkien's story, and it's one of the greatest stories ever told. So whatever I think is wrong with it definitely is not in reality wrong or incorrect, but it's a setting that I don't want to use, that I don't want to ever see in my stories, and it's closely tied to sad consequences that I would like to see antagonists face if the protagonist is able to deliver them. Or, obviously, not just the protagonist, but side characters as well. And to continue with some of the examples in Lord of the Rings, there are no female villains that I would even consider worth mentioning. There is Shelob, but she's a spider. She's a monster, a demon, part spider, part demon, something of a pet that Sauron is aware of being around, but that's it. She's not a character. She's definitely not a female villain. And there are more examples. There are definitely some very powerful female characters in the story. Galadriel being one of the most prominent ones, Arwen being basically just there, even though she did have a role that was again extremely important. She's not a fighter. She's not someone who is able to charge into battle with the rest of the men who just died there by the thousands defending the fate of Middle Earth. But in terms of villains, there is nothing. On the other hand, men, there are plenty of evil. There is Sauron. I know that we could argue if he is a man, but he is definitely a male character from my perspective. Then there is Saruman, who is again something of an angel sent down, but still a male. Then there is Denethor, who went insane using the Palantir. Then there is Boromir, who has the villain's arc, but then redeems himself. I just want some evil women in stories. That's all. Well, I've already talked way too long, so I'm going to jump into Asterix for a short while, and then I'm going to end it for today. Hopefully, I was able to construct something that had at least a little bit of sense. And now Asterix. Last time we saw the attack on the construction site and the documentary on lobsters. Now it's time for Kyle Sepplus to attack again, and we get a Darth Vader moment again when one of his subordinates, Antivirus, questions his decision to attack again, even while facing the invincible ghosts. He chokes Antivirus with his hand, not with force, and mentions that when the Roman Empire is attacked, the Empire strikes back. And poor Antivirus is left with squeaky voice and hurt throat. Then some more references. Numeromis not being pleased by the calm before the storm, and then the soldiers bring in the catapults. And then the bombardment begins. Caius Sepulus being intent on destroying the palace completely, ensuring Caesar's victory over Cleopatra. Two soldiers, or well, one of them even experiences sort of an existential crisis, questioning if all this violence is even necessary, but the other one calmly states that it's fine. In the midst of the text still ongoing, Panoramix conjures a plan to ask Cleopatra to intervene directly since Caesar did that and basically stepped over the rules they have set for themselves during Bet's creation, and they are sending a letter. Obelix thinks that Idefix should deliver it. There is one unexpected and rather unfortunate casualty that happens before Asterix sets on the arduous path to deliver the message, and that's the poor pirates who are again finally seaworthy. Unfortunately, that does not last very long, since Obelix is attempting to return fire by kicking the ammunition that Roman soldiers were sending via the catapults at the palace, and unfortunately it goes too far and hits the poor pirate's Drakkar, sending it again down into the ocean. Caius Sepulus and Amombobis have a stare down, an argument, but when the words are not enough, they each show their inner side. Caius Sepulus being the Darth Vader, producing the typical noise, and Amombobis being the snake, just ink against him, short reference, and then we get Idefix being strapped to Asterix's back so that he can, in the end, actually deliver the message while being delivered by Asterix himself, doped on the strengthening potion. And this is where I'm going to end it for this one.